Okay, so I have this little ceramic bowl and it's full of pearls because, of course, I was crafting. And they're real pearls, right? And it's very like ASMR. Like it's just the pearls with their slightly rough edge, right, on the ceramic bowl. And if you put other beads in it, it changes it, right? And it's pearls.
Uh-huh.
And so I was saying to my husband, I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And he's like, oh, you're literally clutching your pearls. So these are going to be our white women's pearls. We can go sit in the hut of humidity and clutch our pearls and
Love that.
and calm ourselves down. Realize
Yes,
that we are not under attack and we can have these hard conversations.
that's great. And I love a good recycle moment. I love to take something we're already saying and then just like reuse it for my own purposes. So clutching the pearls, perfect. That's like,
100%.
oh, I love that. That's good. And it doesn't always look like what the thing sounded like in our head, you know. I look we're I'm crocheting and I got a rocking chair and someone recently was like, I want one so bad. I was like, get it. You
You
know,
can get
what's
one.
we like rocking as little babies and people like rocking chairs as an older people. Why aren't we rocking now if that's what makes us feel better? And so maybe the pearl clutching is just a new version.
We just need
Embrace it.
whatever can help us like deal with the hardships and the meltdowns that we know are going to come from the hard
This is
conversation.
that's everything. And I feel like that's so much of what deconstructing ends up being is just like, oh, I was fine as I was. And all of these things telling us to go against something that feels natural is just all comes back to the same thing. But it is not a fun or easy process.
It's not
So
fun. You
we
don't
gotta
feel like
prepare
the
ourselves.
good guy. And but this process is helpful, right? So just after last week, I was like, huh, when you said, white women are the men of women. And I was like, this is so helpful because literally every time I am frustrated with an individual man or with men in general, I can stop myself and I can just think, what is the version of that for white women? That white women
Hmm.
do to black women. And sure enough, like any true concept, I shared that on social media and folks went ballistic. I mean, I kid you not, white woman who's been following me for years, like with her full chest, very, very angry that I am deconstructing my own white supremacy. And,
Mhm.
that's what we talked about. Anytime you're deconstructing, you're going to lose people from your life. So,
Right. But your bonds with the people who are around are so much stronger.
correct.
And it's like the whole conflict thing. I heard something recently on TikTok, black women discussing the dishonest uh something. What's the word? Something versus the honest conflict. It's not homeostasis, but it's like to that have this like fake peace, right? Harmony, dishonest harmony versus honest conflict. Which would you rather? A friend group or just like individual friendships where there's conflict can arise and it'll make it beyond. You're just sitting in your hut of humility, and your friends in their hut of humility, and there's grace given. And I also think you end up experiencing more humanization of men with that comparison. And I'm realizing a lot of women have been doing the us and them binary thinking with men. And when they discuss male violence, their intent is not to bring men into the conversation or like help them understand. It's more to tell them off finally, or
Right,
give them a
right.
taste of their own medicine. But that's white feminism.
Right. And the whole purpose of this podcast is for us to radicalize and then send out white women, right, to attack and take down white supremacy, because we know from cults that the most powerful person to go against a cult is an ex-cult member. And with that, I am Daniella Young. In my day job, I am a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. I am always dissecting groups, dissecting processes, and talking about deconstruction, which is where we find the bad code that has been written into our programming, and we literally rip out those stitches. I'm mixing metaphors now, and we remake something. So Rebecca and I are here to do that. I have had the crack in the brainwashing to white supremacy. I don't want to be in that cult anymore. It doesn't mean I don't still have another 5 to 10 years of deprogramming and finding all of these little pieces. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. And it's really all that's required of a good anti-racist or, a good white person these days is just once you acknowledge that crack in the brainwashing is to be on the journey and not look for the destination. I go by White Woman Whisperer on TikTok, less so as of recently, mostly on Patreon. And I'd like to be like a professional Black friend to some people and a friend in a real sense, not in a white supremacist sense where everybody's nice all the time and I talk behind your back. I'm going to let you know what we feel as Black women when it comes to having a sisterly bond with white women and what gets in the way of that and all the trying to bridge the gap between well-meaning white women who have already had the crack in the brainwashing and the Black community and how to interact a little bit more safely. But yeah, I am not let's convince people that racism is real. And
No,
I'm not,
if you don't understand white fragility and white privilege, you need to take some more prerequisites before getting to this podcast. But we are
right.
here to try to help, well, me and other women like me that are trying to do this journey. And I just happen to know that it is so much easier with a guide. It's so much easier when we do it, for me at least, out loud and in public, because then I get the benefit of other people's experiences as well.
Right. And it's making anti-racism accessible, right? Especially I like to think for neurodivergent women as well, because it kind of brings it into an everyday tactile, as we crochet, human place versus the intellectual books. I've read the books, you've read the books, but we clearly see the value in taking it into our lives, applying it, and then having the discussion. Verbal processing helps me so much. And having another person to just kind of bounce that off of with a completely different perspective and same goal. Love it. Love it. And to show
If
we
you're a
survive.
creator on TikTok, I think we all do verbal processing. That's the benefit of it. I love it so much. And today we're going to jump into the deep end as we both sit here with beautiful curly hair and talk about hair and white supremacy and hair and control. And I'm just going to start this off before I give it to White Women Whisperer for an anecdote. I'm just going to start this off with saying, like, hair is very, very critical in coercive control. And when we look at cults and when we look at one cults, abusive one-to-one relationship, we always see hair control and is brushed off as a very not important thing, but it is incredibly important. And it is one of the first ways that you start to dehumanize an individual is by taking their hair or changing their hair or telling them that their hair is not right. And I think you and I interacted before all this when somebody was touching your hair.
Yeah. Well, I wish it was just like a one-time somebody once, But on TikTok specifically, there was this time that another Black woman creator or femme-presented creator asked, "Hey, Black women, share a story of a time someone touched your hair at work." And I decided to share a time in which I was telling two different white women about a story in which my hair was touched over the weekend with my boss, who was a Black man. And we were telling them like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened. He sent me a text message afterwards apologizing, and they talked with the person who touched my hair afterward and let them know this wasn't okay. And then after we finished telling the story, each of those white women listening to the story said, oh my God, but your hair is so gorgeous, and put their hands in my hair in order to something, I'm not sure. But all I did in that moment was make eye contact with my boss. His eyes got big, my eyes got big. I couldn't believe what was happening. But that is probably that was one of the most eye-opening experiences to me, because I watched them listen, kinda get what was being said, and I had a witness to it. Because honestly, so many times after someone has touched my hair, there isn't another person there. Or you just don't know what to do. And there was another person who also didn't say anything because we were shocked, right? But that, I definitely had other people touch my hair once I moved to the Midwest. But then upon telling that person, hey, this happens to me, they were shocked. So they didn't remember touching my hair. They didn't remember that they were one of these people. And I realized this is way beyond being inappropriate or who touches anybody or oh my gosh and shock. This is not that. This is subconscious. This is systemically dehumanized, like in your bones. You don't know that you're touching another human, but you don't realize you don't see that person. Consent doesn't matter. I've had people ask me while grabbing my hair if they could touch, not waiting for the no. And these are very nice, complimentary people. So I also don't want to demonize those people in this story. I want people to know that happens. And if you don't touch hair, you may say something that, compliments, I would say you don't have to. And descriptors, I would leave them out. There's so much behind walking into a place in public with your natural hair and what comes with that. It's almost like, what were you wearing type of feeling sometimes. If you say someone touched your hair, it's like, well, your hair is gorgeous. Well, of course, you chose to. I've had Black women tell me, you chose to go natural. This is a part of that. And I didn't know that. That's not how it's always been for me. And I don't agree. And I don't want to learn how to deal with that. I'd rather talk to white women before it happens.
And of course, the phrase, you knew what you signed up for, right? Like, ever that idea is always a thought stopping cliche, which is a cult thing, right? It's never true. And it's only used to shut down critical complaint, right? And it is another way of blaming victims, right? Or we say in cults, putting systemic problems on the individual, right? So instead of like, why do all these white women think it's okay to touch Black women's hair? Where does that come from? It's, well, Rebecca, you chose to go out in public with natural hair, knowing what it's going to do. And of course, the reality is, whether you knew that or not, it is your right to present yourself to the world any way you want. And I recently learned about this. I was on my TikTok live recording something, and somebody who I know, who follows me, who I've had conversations with, seems like a very nice person. And she was like, oh, I like your wig. Wasn't wearing a wig. So I mentioned that. And then I moved on. And somebody was like, actually, this is a common microaggression that white women do to Black women. Instead of just saying, I like your hair, we say, I like your wig. And there's actually a particular kind of microaggression that I've learned about called a microinvalidation. For me, this shows up when I say I'm a veteran and people are like, what? No, you're not. And then I have to like validate my service, right? And my husband doesn't have to do that. So I think with this like wig microaggression, it's also a micro invalidation because it's also
Mhm.
kind of saying like, oh, your thing is second best. Um, but I learned something else when this happened was that I immediately wanted to jump to that white woman's defense. And I wanted to be like, oh no, she didn't mean it. And then I just didn't. And
Yeah.
I just sat there and I let all of us have the learning, clutched my pearls a little bit, you know. I'm sure it was not comfortable for that white woman either, but she sat there and she took it. And that I think was an even bigger learning for me in that exact moment was the rushing to reassure women of color, black women, that like the white woman didn't mean it, instead
Right.
of just digging into the impact of what actually happened and what was actually done. And I, number one, didn't need to protect her from learning. And number two, I wouldn't have learned as much about it if I had come in with that response.
Right. And you would then, anyone watching, Black women watching, would know not to come to you or not to see this space as a space where we can challenge even this culty dynamic, right? If you defend, because worst case scenario, they're wrong and her intentions weren't that, and you learned something. Like, what's worst case scenario? She got blamed for something. This is the internet. Now we all learned. If you choose to speak, there are consequences. You may be misunderstood. Guess who gets misunderstood every time they open their mouth? Black women. So, like, you'll be okay. People call me things all the time and tell me what my intentions are and that I hate these people. And does it make sense for me to defend myself because my intentions are not that? No. Not to somebody who is, like, worst case scenario in both situations, I think are worth considering, right? Worst case scenario, that woman learned a lesson she didn't technically offend, or you defend somebody and now everyone's kind of uncomfortable. I don't know who's made more comfortable by, having the host defend someone who's offended someone. It's like, but we get so reactionary, and that sense of urgency, like you said, like kind of kicks in. And it, between, making the comparison of white women being the men of women and the acronym WAIT, why am I talking, are two things that I realize are so impactful for white women, but for me are like, duh. Like, what? You get to this, like, the privilege kind of shows for me, because I'm like, oh, it must be nice. You know why Black women can speak with their eyes to each other and with one word is because we don't get listened to. We aren't allowed to speak most of the time. So the why am I talking and asking yourself, why am I doing this? It comes with consideration and all of that stuff. So I, since last week and since we spoke, I realized, oh, that really is something I think I can dig into with my audience, because it humanizes. I'm trying to show you that I see you as human. And in order to see men just like yourself, it's kind of opening up or lowering the walls a little bit for being attacked, or like what our consequences are for offending someone.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's so good that you talk about consequences, because this is another thing that I've learned that's a really good message for white women, which is just like, watch the language that you use. Because somebody calling you in and telling you that you were wrong is not being attacked, right? And so we use this language of warfare and fighting and conflict. We very quickly go to tears or turn it about ourselves, like, oh, I didn't mean that. And that's another just little flag I can put in my brain to like not talk about it in that language. I had this experience in the army where I was talking about my boss to somebody and I was like, yeah, my boss like yelled at me. Of course, he's standing behind me, right? Of course, every time. And he's like, what are you talking about? I didn't yell. And I was like, Yeah, he did it, right? He very calmly said this to me, but he was definitely like, in my mind, I was at the position of attention being yelled at, right? Like that was that interaction for me as a soldier. That's how serious it was. And then I go and I like forward that narrative, right? And
Yeah.
that's what I think of every time when
And
I'm
it
going
makes
to be
me
like,
think
oh,
of,
they attacked me.
yeah, but it also makes me think of the simple things that Black women do. So it's also like there's so much communication in beyond what was said, because you did feel yelled at. You felt yelled at because there were other circumstances that are there. So like we can't act like that doesn't exist when Black women are interacting. It's just, what have you taken from it? So if a Black woman is there and you've reached for her hair or have said, oh, it's so beautiful, and she leans away from you like this and gives you a bit of a side eye, how is that interpreted in the heart of that white woman who was just trying to, I was just trying to compliment? Or, hey, that's a microaggression. This is actually because I'm being Black. This means something. The immediate, oh, no, and the yelling and the attack and the attitude and all of those words, we have to consider when we have to make that split second decision. Am I about to let this lady touch my hair? I almost called something else. She's reaching, I have to think very quickly about my options. And this is why I would love for these conversations to be had prior to events, right? Before it happens, because there is no good situation for that Black girl, that Black woman. And I can't, tell you, hey, that's because you have anti-Blackness in you if I'm at work. Apparently. Apparently they don't like that so much. But I would say, like, if my hair was all gray, if I was clearly much older than you, would you still be grabbing for my hair? And they would sit and think, oh no, probably. It's like, so what does that mean? There's a level of respect I'm not getting.
Yeah.
And
And there's also this like, even when you talk about like the compliments, right? And it's like, we'll go quickly to like, oh, what? So now we can't say anything. And there's this parallel with men. And I've written a whole essay on this called Hot or Not, When to Comment on Someone's Appearance. And it's basically like, but just ask yourself why. Like why you're doing it. Like when you
right.
actually push back on a man and you're why do you feel the need to tell me that this dress looks good? Like, do you tell my husband he looks good in his suit or his new haircut? You probably don't. And
Right.
so my experience, as a woman dealing with men in corporate America was when someone comments on your appearance, now you're all thinking about your appearance. You're not thinking of this person as a fellow professional that I work with. And again, this is why hair is so important to coercive control, because it is that dehumanization. And I have very curly hair that can easily get as big and puffy as yours. And I don't think I ever have had my hair touched or petted by a stranger outside of the cult that I grew up in, where adults felt free to do whatever they wanted. So I
Right.
definitely, obviously, we know because we believe you that this is a racism component, but I just want to put it there, like very clearly. Another thing it makes me think of that I think white women will just immediately understand is when you're pregnant, people just put their hands on you.
Yeah.
And it is bonkers. I mean, literally, somebody who worked for me, who we never had this kind of close relationship, like, why are your hands on me? And one of the best tips I heard was you don't say anything, you just put your hand on their stomach. And they will
Yeah.
immediately realize, right? Like how much of an intrusion that is. And, we dehumanize pregnant women, right? So,
Because
like,
you are for something else. It comes from the same dehumanizing construct that once your body is for usage, and being a Black person all the time. So like with the comparison to pregnancy, yes, it's like the closest you could experience, but like
Right.
that's a troublesome comparison sometimes, because like Black women get pregnant and like it's very different. And also like, I mean, it still comes from being property and stuff, but there's this like also the touching back. I've heard that, but maybe it's also my brand of the tism. I hate that suggestion when they're like, touch their hair back. I'm like, ew, I don't want to do that, you know? And like, and I get it. It's just that, like, especially because there's so many Black women who are returning to being their natural hair selves. And I don't think people understand the emotional journey that that is. And to say, like, oh, or like the compliments, are they necessary? Do they need to be had? Is it worth it? No. The day before I went to work for the first time with my hair curly, I did not sleep. I was so stressed, and I wasn't stressed thinking, what are they going to say? Like, what compliments are they going to give? Or what are they going to say? I hope they compliment me. No, none of that. It was me. It didn't matter what they said. I knew the journey I was going through, and it was going to stress me out no matter what, because they were going to say something, and it doesn't matter. It's being perceived. It's being perceived for being Black. Like you're already, it's a lot. And so many of us are so educated now, and we're ending up in corporate spaces, and I hate what that could mean for so many Black girls finding success, you know, because it's physical. It feels, when I compare it, I've heard myself talk about having my hair touched. It sounds a lot like assault, and how we blame ourselves and how we are then blamed, and like, is your hair professional? But a point you had made earlier about it not seeming very important, and I because I it clicked something for me. It's mostly women who are policing Black women's hair, right? It's not men. Men don't care. Men don't care about what we wear at work, or what professional hairstyles are. They don't care. They're not going to say anything. They say, I like the hair, and then they move on. White women are the only ones who have ever touched my hair and smiled and giggled, and I've said no, and they've done it. They've done it when I can't see, and I've had other people watching, and then I feel immense guilt and shame for not saying anything, and then I think about those coming after me. And it's not just hair. For so many of us, it's like a rejection of, you don't know what your family's done. There's like a whole life to getting your hair done that goes to your giving up, and and so for white women to just kind of be like, oh, like, it's deeper than like curly, not curly. But I
This
don't want to
point
sound like I'm
that you
judging
made,
anybody.
this point that you made about it being like assault, I think is very poignant. And the way you talked about it, the emotion that I heard in your voice when you were talking about being touched in that way, that is the way we feel when we are assaulted, when we have to ask people to watch our backs because we don't feel safe. And I'm sure you've heard this quote, like, your right to swing your fist stops where my nose begins. And hair
I've
is a
never.
part of you. Hair is
Yeah.
a part of you. You can't just touch somebody else's hair. And I absolutely agree, though I've never thought about it that way, that is a form of assault. It is.
It is, and we've been gaslit so much as Black people that it's like, oh, yeah, but that's the pain of it, is the like, you're not allowed to feel that much about it. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts, and then having to explain to these women who are so quote unquote fragile, or volatile is more the word I like to use, that what are our options? There is so little consent between white women and Black women. Like, And you can see it with hair stuff. And then imagine, right? So I make this post about how a woman touched my hair and then two women listened to me say it and then did it themselves at the same time on two sides of my head. Like I could not feel more like a dog. And I'm watching this man I respect watch me. We just have to laugh. Like I don't know what to do with that, you know? It just happened and all I can do was talk about it. And then have people go, no, I don't think it's a color thing. And like, oh, I have curly hair too. And people touch. And it's like, yeah, no, I can't. Because of the decision to even let my hair grow out of my head, like it was never a thought in my mind for like 26 years. My hair was straight. If I could insert a picture right now of my fried hair, I never thought I would go natural. And then I do, and it comes into my life is in my hair and I'm getting used to it. And then you say, you know, oh, it's so whatever. Like, do you think that's, you know, I need the compliment? No, I just need to keep making it and survive. You know, I do get compliments and it's fine. I'm at a better place now, but it's like, you have no idea. And so imagine a man going like, who gropes people anymore? Or like, you're telling a story about how and he just goes, oh, he's just flirting with you. He just likes you, you know, and he just, you know, he just wants a hug. It's just a quick hug. Give him a side hug and then it's easier to just let him do it than file a complaint or try to get another job.
I had a tiny bit of that experience when I was deployed to Afghanistan as a soldier, and we're 5% women on the base, right? And I would talk about how nerve-wracking and awful it was to walk through the chow hall, the cafeteria, because every person is just staring at you. And literally the response I would get would be, oh, it must be so hard to be pretty.
How, right? Right? And like, and so sometimes when,
We're men of women.
exactly. So like it's hard sometimes because then you say the stories and you think and you're giving this thing that is so, you know, and even coming into today I was like, no, this will be fine. We're talking about hair. Like I'm not going to get emotional. It's a surprise. Like of course I am. You can always tell there's a in one of the books, I think it's More Than Enough. Just you can tell the state of a teenage girl by the state of her hair, a black girl, a black teenage girl by the state of her hair, and just talk to her where she is on her journey. And it's such a integral part of who you are as a woman. Like I think people get that to a degree, but it's your identifier as for some of us, right? Like for me, it was my curse as a child. I hated my hair. My brother got the lighter hair, more your tone, and like a lot easier to deal with. And I was so upset that I couldn't get that hair. And like it just if I could do anything, it would have been that. Not that I wanted to be white. I wanted the ease. I wanted to just have the ease mostly. I just wanted to know what to do with it and all that. But
And that is something I think that is so, so, so important and that is almost lost in the conversation, right? And I agree with you that like all humans are connected to their hair, right? All women care a lot about their hair. There's a reason that the first thing they do to dehumanize men in the military is take their hair. The term for that is a degradation ceremony, by the way.
okay.
So we're all connected to our hair, right? That's the first way we describe people. But there's never been a time in America where my hair, the way it grows out of my head with 5 minutes of what it takes me to do, is not considered appropriate, right? Yes, there's more bias against curly hair, especially in America. I love to go to Europe because I'm like, yay, the land of not perfect hair. You know, and even I feel a weight off in Europe or in South America, but it's this entire history, right? Like I have had jerks tell me my curly hair is not professional in the workplace, but it doesn't come with that entire history that you mentioned.
Right.
And, you know, I'm writing about this in my forthcoming book, The Culting of America, when we look at hair control, right? We've seen this really, really weaponized against Black people, against Native American children, especially in their
Mm,
residential schools, and even against Sikh people, who are some of the fiercest warriors on this planet, who have not been able to serve in the US Army since way, way, way back until very recently because
mm,
they don't cut their hair. For spiritual reasons, right? So there are all of these different ways in American history, and like still currently to this day, that are being used to discriminate against people. And I recently had a TikTok live talking about this, and she was talking about how she talks with her daughters about their hair when they're sitting there for 2 hours getting their hair braided.
mm.
And like just that, right? The way
Yep.
I gotta tell you, I took my 8-year-old to a movie the other day, and at the end, when she was running up and down the aisle, and I told her that we can't go to movies until she's able to sit for 2 hours. And she looked at me and she just said, I'm supposed to sit still for 2 hours? And it was blowing her mind, right? And like, how many more hours of just childhood do
Yeah.
white girls get? Because I
Uh,
didn't have to sit in things for 2, 3, 4 hours when I was a child, and you did. We
right.
talk all day long about the woman
Two
tax,
hours.
right? And the money we pay to patriarchy. And there is that also for Black women,
Oh my
hugely.
gosh. I mean, and 2 hours is like fast. You said 2 hours. I was like, they must have gone to a fancy one where you get to make an appointment. That was not, it was a day. You go to the salon and because everyone shows up early. And I mean, that may just be where I was from when I was getting relaxers, because then there's also the element of relaxers. So that's what, makes our hair chemically straight. And kids getting relaxers at really young ages. I didn't, but it was like a big decision. And there's like a really, really, really high increased risk of uterine cancer and all these types of cancers associated with the chemicals that we are putting on our scalps and our heads to straighten our hair, um, to fix it, right? Because that was you were fixing it. And the people inhaling the chemicals, I used to get scalp burns, scalp scabs, and I didn't really know what was going on because my white mom was just like following what my friend's mom was telling her to do, which is a whole other thing. We tried, but all of this, so like also relaxers and the chemical burns, and then if you don't have relaxers, then the humidity, the amount of time I would spend thinking about how to best counter humidity in my environment, or because I didn't know how to do my hair. I spent my whole days every other week at the salon. I was shackled to my town and to my salon and to that day. And I didn't even have shampoo because that's what you did. That's what everybody did. We go there, we spend the day, you see the girls from school, and maybe it gets awkward, but you bring your homework, you bring magazines, your Walkman and everything. Um, yeah, but there's also community there and you get used to certain things, and there's like a cultural aspect to knowing that information. But going on vacation wasn't just going on vacation. In fact, that day that I went to work the first time and I didn't sleep, I had decided that that was the day because I had gone on vacation the week before and I wasn't going to be able to get to the salon in time. And I knew that when booking the vacation months ahead. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to book the vacation, and will I have time to get my hair done before I come back? Because it's going to Dominican Republic or something. And it's going to be curly. I'm not going to know what to do. I'll just like figure it out. But if the days and I have to match up. And I decided, okay, I guess July 2016, which is what it was, July 2016. That's the day I'm going in. I'm coming back from vacation and I'm going to go in with my natural hair. But I stressed about it before going on vacation. Like coming back, like before planning it, before deciding that it's possible to go, I'm thinking about my hair. And
Something
that's
else.
when I realized I can't live my life like this.
And this is where another cult thing comes into play, which is called purity requirements. And any version of you're not good enough, right,
Mm,
is going to be a purity requirement. I don't put X in my hair. I don't put X in my body. I was a full-on part of the curly girl cult for a while, I will tell you. Um, and something about purity requirements, why they work is because humans are really bad at being pure and perfect all the time. And so it turns you into your own jailer, right? Your own self-surveillance. You know,
Oh, yeah.
someone, Black woman on a conversation recently was telling me, like, there's no Black culture version of a messy bun, right? Like, that's just not a thing. So, like, you're always having
Yeah.
to think about how am I presenting myself? How am I hair? And there's just lists of things that surveillance does to human beings, right? Like, there's a reason that constant surveillance is a form of torture and of breaking people. And this is part of why we always see, right, appearance control, which I found breaks into 4 parts: hair, body size, body coverage, and underwear, including
Mm.
socks and pantyhose. And sure, we'll get to all of those because
Yeah.
body size and body coverage are definitely whole ones that, like, white supremacy has a big old say in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The messy bun, I guess, like, that's been the whole bonnet conversation too. Like, wearing the bonnet out, I guess, is our version of the messy bun, and people think that's not okay. I mean, maybe it's not. I wouldn't say it's a direct correlation, but I battle with some of those things, obviously, still. The internalized anti-blackness that I felt towards myself for so long, just for having the hair I have. It was never really for me about the skin, it was hair. Like, I didn't get the, like, want to be lighter thing, but the straighter hair, the girls who didn't have to get relaxers, because I had a lot of biracial friends. So I was in a diverse environment, but I still had this, but my mixed friends who had the wavier hair were they were, I was jealous of them. Or, you know, because even my cousin was half Black, half white, and her mom has like straight hair. And I was just so focused. I'm like, why? I was so close to getting. And to believe that now I'm in this place where I'm just like, yeah, I wear my hair, I figure it out. Some days it's up, some days it's down, and I don't do a lot to it. I don't need to. I just started caring for it. And like, I remember when someone asked me, what's like the hair care stuff? And I said, you know, you got to really just like care for your hair. And I was like, that's the worst answer. It's like patience. But those are the things. Is like love the way it comes out and say it's not inherently flawed. I had to tell myself that. Like, it's going to be
Yeah.
okay because hair is just hair. But it felt like death.
And in the conversation about how, like, white supremacy is not better for any of us, right? Like, this bleeds over where, you know, when my daughter was 1 year old, she had a full head of curly hair. And I remember my brother-in-law was like, where does she get the curly hair from? And my husband just looked at her and was like, from Daniella? And he was like, how would I know? I've never seen her with curly hair. Right. And I literally had this moment where I was like, wow, yeah, because every time I'm like presenting myself to the world, I
Mm.
straighten my hair. You know, I just read this thing where for like women, we have to do nothing makes us masculine. For men, doing nothing makes them masculine. But for women, we have to do all this work to be feminine. Otherwise, we're not considered feminine. Um, so that was the day I stopped straightening my hair for about 6 years. And of course, racism never came into this, but I feel like it was a really important time of my life for me, fully aware, by the way, that my husband loves the blonde Barbie blowout, and just being like, no, I'm choosing not to do that. Like, I'm choosing not to play this part of the beauty politics. And I mean, I feel like I got a 6 year education into how biased America especially is towards straight hair. And of course, that comes from
Anti-
racism and white supremacy. And if you're watching us, this painting behind me, like, this was part of me trying to work with that. And then interestingly enough, because I did it in rainbow colors, she turns out to be raceless. And so a lot of Black women have told me, you know, reminds me of my daughter or myself, right? Like, waiting to get my hair done. But I started seeing it everywhere, and just the thought of like how much work I am going to have to do to get my child to love her curly hair and not hate her curly hair by the time
Yeah.
she's 11 or 13 is astronomical. And like her hair got straight and everything in life got easier.
Mm.
Uh, just it's not, I don't know how to explain it, but it's
Well,
crazy again that something that seems so not a big deal, right? It's your hair, but it's really one of the most important and expressive things about us.
and of course they make it seem unimportant because women, it's dominantly our conversation. So of course it seems like not a big deal, but what do we mean? Because how is it a big deal in Black culture and in Indigenous culture, but it's just not a big deal in like, interesting how that works. And like, yeah, the weight that it is for us doesn't have language so much yet. And also, I think white women need to realize when they approach Black hair in that conversation, you also bring with you the Tignon laws, those laws that say Black women had to have their hair covered. Like, that didn't come from the men. Like I said, Crown Act doesn't have to be because men care a lot. Women are the like body controllers of Black women, white women are, of each other. Like,
Right. And
protecting
a
each other.
huge part of the Tignon laws was white women being jealous of Black women's hair and all the different things that you can do with it, that you can't do with our hair. And it being this, us versus them. And so we have to demonize this. And it's interesting in the same way that when you look back, before African slavery, skinniness was not prized. And you look back before then, and like curly hair throughout history has been a sign of beauty, right? The curls in her hair. And we, like so many things, like took that and completely inverted it for our like modern day form of beauty. And,
Yeah.
I just want to make this like kind of really real for white women and just keep bringing up like the amount of time that we have to spend getting ourselves ready. And that we can all think about all the things we have to do that our white husbands don't have to do. Like a few years ago decided like I'm done with eyebrows. Like my eyebrows, the patriarchy is getting no more of my time or money or resources like on my eyebrows. I think I'm mostly done with makeup too. And again, that's a privilege because I can present myself to the world a little more messily, as it were, than
Yeah.
you might be able to. But something I think about a lot is because my career was in the military and the amount of impact that having your hair considered to be non-professional has on Black women in the military. Right. So just generally, right, military standards, appearance regulations, hundreds of pages on how you are supposed to look. And they're made for two things. Everything is about not standing out, and everything is so that you look like a 6'2", blonde, blue-eyed helicopter pilot with a jaw that can cut glass. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And those veterans exist. I love the one that I'm married to. But every demographic you are away from that, your time in the military gets harder. And when certain men don't understand this, I can just lean into them and say, aren't you short? And immediately they get it, right? Immediately. Like if you're in the military, you're shooting with a weapon that was made for a 6 foot tall person. So if you're not
Mm.
a 6 foot tall person, you are disadvantaged, right? And just over and over and over again. One of my
Right.
most viral TikToks was about how women's hair in the army gets moldy because, we're only given sometimes 45 minutes between finishing a workout and having to present yourself in uniform. There's no
Oof.
time for blow dryers. And even if there is, we don't always have electricity in what we're
Yeah.
doing. And so your hair is going up wet. And I mean, when my hair goes up wet, it comes down still wet 12 or 24 hours later. So I'm sure that is even far more true for you. So there's hair that gets moldy. There's having to wear a wig in uniform and do physical labor and soldier tasks. Like, I can't even wear a wig for 15 minutes without losing my mind. And it just goes on and on and on, right? Like, your hair has to be perfectly slicked down. No babies, no flyaways. I mean, I can have as messy a bun as anything, but all my little baby hairs in the back have to be pinned up. Oh, by the way, you know what hairspray does to you when you're in a not indoor environment? It tends to attract a lot of bugs.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Getting swarmed by mosquitoes when you're out like lying behind a machine gun because of your hairspray is just not fun at all. And so, like, these have just been like 3 or 4 examples, right,
Yeah.
of the different impacts. And then I think of my career and how I was considered the golden child and how I was always tracking how much harder I had to work than the men. But I never thought about how much harder, like, every Black woman was having to work than me. And this is just on one topic, hair.
Right. And that's just the like physical what happens and what do you have to do. That, that's just pragmatically, not even what does that do to your psyche? What does that do to your sense of self and working around it, and how does it just wear you down from the inside out? But it's interesting when you were describing exactly what they want you to look like and be like, that is literally, I was hearing corporate America. It's like, that's exactly what an executive looks like. Slick back, not distinguishable, another dude at the place making the same kind of statement everybody else is, not, but also,
Right.
put together, and a man. And
Right. And I was on the NAACP Legal Defense Fund website today because I'm quoting this in my book, because this is where I end up, right? I start with how cults control hair, then I go to how the military controls hair, how it's been used historically against those groups we mentioned, and then into corporate America and specifically professionalism. And it says in bold writing on the NAACP Legal Defense Fund site that professionalism is just racism in another form. It is 100% about don't be different, right? Even when I was talking about the Sikhs, right? The Sikh project or the Sikh group, whatever this group that was doing legislation that successfully got people to be able to serve in the military, and they said the quiet part out loud, which is just like, all of these appearance regulations are based on an outdated version of what Americans and American soldiers look
like. Yeah. Once I realized, like, I was starting to get to the costume era of my corporate experience, where I was just like, what? I started to really realize that when I was working from home, because once we're all aware that we're at home, and for some reason I'm wearing a shirt I would never wear at home, but I'm also wearing pajama pants, and everybody else is wearing pajama pants, and also we're doing the mullet outfit where it's business on top. I'm like, well, but who's wearing these clothes? Men are wearing these clothes. These white men wear this stuff all the time. And then and the hair, like, when I first interviewed to go to business school, I had never put my hair up since going natural. And it was a couple of years after, maybe like 3 years. And I had pins everywhere, just pins. And there was pins everywhere. Luckily, the interview was with a Black man, and he, I was able to talk to him about it. But that was a big focus of my interview, was like, put it back. I don't know what's going to happen. And decided to go forth and just like leave my hair how it was, because in New Jersey, everybody seemed fine. But in Chicagoland, everybody was like, oh, it's so gorgeous. And now I'm touching it.
Yeah, and when your job is to not stand out, like that puts so much pressure on you. And you know, there's all kinds of writing about how COVID, like Black women don't even want to go back to work because they realize like how great life is when you're just free of the microaggressions of, let's name it, white women, right? In the workplace based on appearance and how they're presenting themselves. And I hold out hope that COVID and virtual is gonna like get rid of this professionalism BS concept. You know, I love how now it's like totally appropriate to just have children screaming in the background when you're on a business call, and like everybody understands that. But think like 3 years ago with BBC Dad, you know, where, I don't know if you remember that, where his kids burst in.
I love that video so much.
And COVID was so weird. By the way, crazy time to be getting a master's degree in organizational psychology and looking at the future of work, because like we were literally in the middle of a hot, heavy debate about whether jobs even can be done virtually. And all of a sudden, like we found out, like we hardcore found out. And of course, women were overly impacted by COVID, right? Because America doesn't have safety nets, it has women. But I also have this hope that it's also going to be this like huge fount of progress because of working from home and being less professional and, you know, all of those things that we sort of decided to just get over.
Yeah, we're like rehumanizing ourselves and each other. I think we notice, and also being able to see that these dudes making decisions were just dudes making decisions, and they didn't have some kind of magical something that gave them all this confidence to tell us what to do all the time. And also hearing each other have completely different jobs, but somehow the same experience. It, you know, this kind of just zooming out and realizing like, what are we doing? You're having the same conversation I have, you know, corporate Erin and just the like the jokes about corporate culture, and you know, this is very important. And when you know your job isn't important and they try to make you feel as though it is while there is a pandemic going on, it's like, okay, women, I think we realized we messed up. We believed them for too long. They said they got it together, and just wait, hold on. Wrong. You know, they just like keeping the status quo, and we pay rent on these buildings. We want you in these buildings. You know, I was working in a commercial division of a pharmaceutical company. Why are you stressing me out? This is not important. I'm working sales
like,
operations.
Why does it matter what my hair looks like? You know, we're going to talk about this when we get to the one that we will inevitably do on body size. But like in the Army, right? Like I lost several intelligence analysts right before going to war for being too fat, which, you know, too fat in quotes in the Army, right?
Right.
And they were too fat for their literal job description of sit at your desk for 12 hours a day and look at reports, you know, which by the way, all of the analysts that the CIA and DIA and everyone else sends over to us or supports from back home don't have these requirements. I want to tell like a really sobering story about hair control and assault. And this is the military, and I call this 5 steps from the perfect bun to rape culture. So in the US Army, you had to have a perfect bun in uniform, right? We've talked about this. There are caveats. If your hair could be down if it was short and didn't touch your shoulders, but it better be straight, by the way, because if it's too lifted off your head, you're going to get in trouble for that, right? You could have a French braid tucked under, but you have to know how to do a French braid on yourself backwards. There was a few things, but for most women, it was a bun, right? You had to have a bun in uniform. Mm-hmm. By the way, this is not operationally effective, right? There's no sport that has women in buns except for gymnastics, and it's ridiculous.
Right.
Specifically when you have to shoot a rifle and you have to lay down in what's called the prone, right behind your rifle, looking through the sights, your helmet, which is also made for men, so it doesn't have a bun spot, your bun pushes your helmet forward onto your eyes. So it is literally impossible, right? Like this regulation affects operations negatively. Okay. Also, when you are running your 2-mile fitness test, you had to have a perfect bun until 2014. And women would get stopped on their run and told to fix their hair. Now, here's where it gets really ugly, is that in these 2 times, so 4 times a year, if you don't pass your physical fitness test or if you don't pass your shooting qualification, you can lose your career. Okay. So there is a whole brand of predator in the US Army, military in general. We all just have slightly different regulations, and I'm not trying to give the vet bros rooms to like say stuff to me. But in the Army, there's a very specific type of predator who sells themselves as tough on female hair regulations. Right. And we know that all you need to assault somebody is power over them and isolation. So now, because you've failed your fitness test, or because you've failed your shooting, or just because your hair is too messy, I can pull you aside, isolate you, take you down to that basement where I can do whatever I want to you. That's a reference to my book, Uncultured, for those who haven't read it. So, right, like very clear links to harassment and assault. And I'm fortunate that this never happened to me, but I was an officer. And as soon as I started talking about this on social media, I've heard countless stories, right? When you have a regulation for something, it gives people something to hold over you. So fast forward to 2014, they let us start wearing ponytails in workout uniform. OMG, changed our lives. Still, it was very important for every woman in uniform to know the exact regulation that said we could have ponytails. Otherwise, anyone that wanted to could just stop you and absolutely harass you. Finally, in 2014, by the way, was also when they had to rescind their women's hair regulations for being so incredibly anti-Black. Literally, the US Army had to repeal the regulations they published in 2014. Anyone can look this up because they got called out for being incredibly anti-Black. So fast forward to 2021, when the Sergeant Major of the Army changes the hair regulations for women. And just for everybody, the reason that the men didn't get permission to wear beards is because hundreds of women filed asking to not wear buns. Guess how many men actually did the paperwork for no beards? That's right, 0. Okay, so the Sergeant Major of the Army and 3 other men come out onto this stage where they are going to announce the changes to women's appearance regulations. And he's literally sitting there, right? You've just closed this pretty significant avenue for predators. Not to mention the bun is something that causes alopecia, hair loss, migraines, back strain, makes women get out of the military before 10 years in, on and on. And the way he announces it is, we know that ponytails and nice nails are important to y'all's identities as women. Yeah. That, and then explaining it to my husband. And my husband, who was in the Army for 20 years, who was in aviation, who was once a sergeant, who 100,000% has been in charge of women qualifying with their rifles. He looked at me and he was like, "You have to shoot with a bun in ACH? That's the helmet." And then he just goes, "Can't be done." I'm just looking at him. And this is when I realized, I was like, oh, the reason we can't beat rape culture in the military is because all of the men at the top either are the predators or they've never seen the problem. right? Like they literally can't see the problem. And nowadays,
Right.
I love to describe privilege as your ability to not notice. That's your
Yes.
privilege.
Yes. Yeah. I've That's perfect because, like I was saying, when I'm trying to explain it to someone, I'm like, no, you don't see that, like, you just going like this and touching a coil, so much more is happening. And it's not just we should be allowed to wear our hair. So when it was like, oh, the Crown Act, now officially you can't be discriminated against for your natural hair. Like, okay, do you think that's going to actually change the experiences of the Black women in the office? Because they made it, like, they fought for it. What are we doing? Why do we want to be in this space where it's not about our identities. I mean, it is, but it's about our leave us alone, our humanity, our autonomy, our agency, and that's it. You want me to do the job, or do you want me to play the part? But realizing that a lot of these is just play the part. It's not about can you shoot the people, it's are you a good soldier for us?
Right.
You know?
And I talk about this in the part on skinniness. So, by the way, my husband, who is retired out of the special operations helicopter unit that was built in response to the Iran hostage crisis going poorly, right? So these are the most experienced helicopter pilots in the world running the most dangerous missions. And he told me, like, being tall and skinny and running fast was always more important to his career advancement than his skill as a pilot. Right. And this is where it really comes back to cults. And the reason that the skinny white woman is so skinny, I love when people are like, why she got to be white? I'm like, I have 25 pages of research on this. But the
Not
reason
really.
that the cults want you skinny is because it is a visual representation of sacrifice. Right. And that is what the military thinks. It's like they want to be able to see in you that you are working hard. And so anything that is not or can't be perfectly to standard is a sign that you're not a good soldier. And it basically comes down to you're not playing the game. Right. And so for me, standards in the military and professionalism in the work world are these perfect corollaries. And definitely getting the Crown Act is not going to help that much because I was interviewing while pregnant, and that's already a protected category. And let me tell you.
Like, it's like doing the ponytail thing. Like, oh, we can wear ponytails. You're asking the wrong people for the wrong thing. And why are we asking? We need to realize that. What are we doing? I was working at this job, doing this thing, conforming, muting myself, and it's just unfortunate for them, fortunate for me. I had been ingrained with some sort of sense of self and acceptance around all of this stuff before I got to the place where I started being gaslit, because I had enough support and knowledge that this shouldn't be happening. And it doesn't have to happen. And clearly there are these, I am for the first time ever meeting white people who have never had Black friends, like actual friends, like you said, in their kitchen. They were like on a team with some once, maybe. And just that concept alone was like, well, of course they don't know. Well, whatever. If it's just media or something, I want to be someone's Black friend so that, one, you're not harming other people by trying to befriend them before you're aware of just like the harm that can be done without you seeing it, because the privilege to not see it, not notice, and live your life without considering these things and not feel an obstacle in any way. Like, it, once you realize once I realized I wasn't doing the job I was actually hired to do, once you're not shooting to shoot well, you're shooting to get on the team, to then say you're on the team, to then get an award. Start to go like, oh, well, when's the end? When is the fun part and the success and the
Right.
relaxation? It doesn't come.
And that's part of, I think that's part of what so many people are like reclaiming now. And this is probably a great point to wrap up. When I talk to people about deconstructing from cults, one of the first things I'm like, just like, wear a wacky outfit, right? Wear your hair any way you want. Putting colors in your hair can be a big thing for people, right? Like crazy colors, but just
Yeah.
understanding that the way you present yourself to the world and the contents of your brain, like there's not a hierarchy of looks for
Right.
smarter, right? And I think, I don't know if you're this way, but this is part of the knitting for me, right? It's like literally people see me knitting, this has happened my whole life, and they just immediately discount me. Oh, girl, and then it's like it's almost your advantage, because then it's like, well, when you underestimate me, like I am going to blow you away with how good this is.
Yeah.
Literally on YouTube, I just named myself Knitting Cult Lady, because I'm like, the trash will filter itself out. I won't have to
It's
deal
perfect.
with that much. But I've just come to this point where I'm like, no, I'm not professionalizing myself, right? Like I professionalized myself by getting an education and experience and expertise and putting that out into the world in stories and words that people can easily understand. That's how
Yep.
I professionalized myself. Like my earrings, my body coverage, body size, hair, or
Right.
underwear has nothing to do with the contents of my brain.
It literally doesn't. It's just a place for other people to put you in a box and for other people to understand you better. All these labels do is so that the system can place you, but you don't want to do that. It does not benefit you as an individual to mute yourself. It benefits the system. And going natural, letting my hair grow out of my head was like the start to my activism, and I didn't even know it. Um, and I don't know how people perceive me, and I think that's part of it. Because I've always been kind of like, people look at me and they used to go like, speaking Spanish or something, and nope. And being Jewish and Black and in a diverse environment never really racialized myself that much until I was like 30. So that's why maybe this work is easier for me, because I don't have as much racial trauma. I've got my own like brand of trauma, but racially, well, I've got my internalized stuff, but my hair was at 26. So like this is a whole journey for everybody. Um, but I don't know how people perceive me. I also look younger than I am. I think ageism is something we should discuss too, because in Black culture, like that's not really, it's almost like I have the opposite problem. I'm like, please think I'm older than I am, so you would respect me at least a little bit, because they thought I was 20. I was 30, and then so they're trying to get me jobs as if I'm 20, but I got a grad school degree. So there's that. Um, so I'm always trying to. I don't know what people think when they see me, so I'm just kind of like, "Bah." I tried to do the professional. It's
Yeah.
boring anyway. Oh,
Well, I think one of the points is that so many of the stereotypes that we came up with as shortcuts for understanding each other just don't work, because nobody actually fits them, right? And so the whole point is, I think no one's going to know how to perceive you or me until they actually engage with us. And that is what we need more of in the world, right? Like we need to stop having these shortcuts like, oh, she's whatever, right? She must
yeah.
be X.
Yeah, I think
You know,
that's probably something I didn't get too much of. There's certain things that I'm like, oh, this value I really took on, this value I didn't. Because internally, I know I'm always like, surprise, with whatever part of my identity I want to surprise people with. So I go into it like, who knows? It's someone, your background, like, because you don't know what about the person also differentiates them. It's not always race and ethnicity, sometimes it's experiences and go.
and I just really don't think you ever get to know yourself when you're dressing according to rules, right? Like that's what I really learned. I never would have thought of
Yeah.
myself as a stylish person or someone that knew like anything. And now,
No.
like, I love my style. I love what my clothes and my appearance and my hair and however I can make my hair look says about me. Because I'm following my own rules. You know, earrings have to be yay big to get worn by Daniela. Like, these are the rules. My poor mother, she bought me some Alice in Wonderland earrings that she was very proud of. And they were just not big enough. So now they are brooches on scarfigans.
Hey, we love that. Recycle, reuse.
But, you know, coming up with our own things, this is what so much of this podcast is about. Thank you so much for teaching us today and for being willing to come here with the emotional toll that I know that it takes on you, so that you can be the professional Black friend and help us. I have learned so much from you today, and I can't wait for next week.
Me too. Thank you so much for hosting me once again. I feel good. I'm going to sit with this for a bit too. I feel like every time I walk away, I'm like, that, making those links is just an ever evolving process. We can say the same things, but every time it's just like, oh, here's a new layer of connection and human experience that is just so close to the surface, but underneath that we can all kind of connect to. It's pretty cool. So
And I
I'm
hope
excited.
it speaks to the audience too, that we who have been doing this stuff for so many years, like, still go away from these conversations and think about stuff, because that literally all deconstruction is being like, oh, that's inside me. Like, where did that come from? Right? Taking it out, examining it, deciding if you want it or not, and then getting rid of it. And as ever, when we deconstruct, we learn about our personality types. And then even if those were formed by a cult or a bad way of thinking, we can still use those for the good stuff. So I will continue to encourage my white women sisters to work on becoming the Karens of anti-racism. I am
Yes.
Daniella Young. I wrote a book called Uncultured about growing up in the Children of God and then being a woman in the US Army. And a big focus of that book is how much systems traumatize you when they are not made for you. You can get copies of that in the links below, as well as signing up for my Patreon or Rebecca's Patreon, as we are both putting all kinds of different content on there.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you on Patreon.